Hi, welcome to Sustainable Hydroponics. I'm Jeff, your gardening coach. Today we're talking training. Let's go. Hi, welcome to Sustainable Hydroponics. I'm Jeff, your gardening coach. Today we're going to be talking about training. Now, when we get into training, there's a lot of various techniques, and it really depends on the type of plant you have as far as the growth structure of it. When we start looking at training and topping and pruning techniques, we need to take one thing into consideration, and that is genetically, the plant will only produce so much. We can create as many flower sites as we'd like, but for the most part, the plant's still only going to yield so much, so we actually start affecting the size of our fruit when we're done. So we definitely need to understand what the maximum yield of our type of plant is and how it produces, and then we can start to understand how we're going to train, prune, do any type of bending or anything like that. So I've brought out a plant, and this one we're not going to actually do any cutting on because as you can see, she's a little sick. We're working on bringing her back to life. We're starting to get some green back into her leaves, so she's slowly coming back. But for demonstration purposes, I can absolutely use this as a visual, so we're going to get right into it. On a plant like this, there's so much vegetative growth, we can actually bend these out and tie these down, but the plant in itself is so sturdy structurally that bending it really isn't going to do much. It's just going to fill in all those spaces with more leaf versus flower sites. So in something like this, I've learned that when we start taking off tips of the flower site, it definitely produces a more bushy growth. And this is generally because now we're starting to redirect hormones in the plant. We've got our apical bud, and this is basically going to contain a whole bunch of hormones. Now we can pluck this top off, and that will redirect those hormones. Basically, the plant is going to have to, it's going to want to make more of these little sites, so it will produce more progression off the bottom and start coming up and filling in more as a bush. So anytime we start picking off those apical bud sites, then we're going to promote more lower growth, which is going to give us more apical buds. And as we prune those off, it will continue to give us more lateral branching underneath. And this is where we really start to notice a difference in fruit size, because as we get more flower sites or more top sites, we're going to end up with more fruit. Well, if the plant can genetically only produce so much, then we're going to start affecting the sizes of each one of those fruits. So if this pepper plant, we're going to say, is going to yield 1,200 peppers, if I pruned this 1,000,000 times, it'll possibly produce more peppers, but they won't be the same size. They'll theoretically be smaller because it has to take the energy that it had from that one pepper and disperse it out into 4 peppers. So there's definitely a limit on how much we can top or train. And this is where different techniques start to come into play. Because when we talk one potted container, we generally look at the amount of produce that it'll produce. Generally, that's measured in square footage or cubic footage, depending on the breeder and how they design the genetics. But essentially, we can take a plant, and with a product like this is just a training screen. There's many different methods. This one was just easy for me to bring outside and display. These basically will help you spread out the plant. When you start spreading out the plant by topping and bending branches, you start creating more square footage of plant matter. So if I were to take this and squish it down on top, you can already see how it pushes all those branches out. And as I start to train this and weave these branches through, and this is a very bushy, dense plant, so it's difficult to do. If I had a more lengthy, viney type plant, this would be very awesome, because I could take a net 4 times the size of this table that I'm sitting on and stretch it out, and I can take one plant in the middle and weave those branches in and out through the net. So it creates a way to hold it like this. And as those flower sites grow back up, you just continue to bend them down. As you do that, you're creating more square footage of plant mass. And this is what we call a screen of green, just because it literally makes this big screen with nothing but a canopy. The screen begins to support the weight of the vegetative material. As we develop that flat canopy, everything that's below it gets trimmed off because there's no light penetration. We generally don't do this outside because the way our sun rises and sets and the curvature of our atmosphere generally will make the outer parts of that screen less productive than the very top and the middle. So we generally try and keep a round bush type plant outside, but when we start getting into indoor gardening, it definitely makes sense when we've got our light and a flat surface, it definitely makes sense to make a canopy as flat as a table. And then once we trim everything off underneath, it becomes 100% sufficient in the sense that it's absorbing every molecule of light that's being dispersed through that canopy. As we do that, we definitely are increasing our yields because we're taking non-productive matter off of the plant, and we're taking all the productive matter and we're stretching it out so that it can make more productive matter. Versus a plant like this, you're gonna get, because we've got a lot of very top flowering sites, we're gonna get a ton of production through the top. But if you look inside, there's very little light penetration to the middle of that. So we need to definitely prune this back to increase some airflow, and it'll definitely allow light to go through, allowing these flower sites to really do what they're meant to do. So, and that's where I get back to, it's very important on the type of plant you're working with, because that's gonna definitely affect whether you decide to top it 2 or 3 times and let it bush out, or whether or not you decide to try and control it and make it more mimic a vine so that you can create more flowering sites. So whether we're talking tomatoes or whether we're talking peppers or even beans, things that vine, things that bush, even roses are actually a great example on training techniques, because if you look at how a rose grows as a bush, you can absolutely trim it back to where it just grows one stem straight up, or we can pick that empirical bud off, and we can start bending branches back and tying them down so that we get more of a bowl shape. This is going to create way more flower sites, which is just going to give us that bush fill appearance that we like with our really gorgeous roses, and then it's going to have all those beautiful stem flowering sites popping up because we've topped it a few times, so we've increased the amount of flower sites, and yet we still have a very full, voluptuous colored rose. That's all based off of how we choose to bend and tie and prune our plants back. And it very is variety specific, and this is where it gets difficult for me to show you all the different ways you're going to run into trimming or pruning and training, is because you're going to end up with varieties that are maybe they are a vining type plant or they want to vine, but you're going to have stalks that are so thick and sturdy that they can't be bent. So trying to weave them in and out of a screen can be very difficult. So that's where we just try and top and promote more lateral growth out the side to create a more bushy canopy. Maybe it doesn't shoot up as thick. It's got a little weaker type stems. So instead of topping it, and stressing out the plant and slowing some of its vigor down, we're going to do, and this is called low stress training, and that's where you start to weave it through, because it's very minimal versus removing a limb, let's say, from the plant. And it all depends on how they recover. It's all going to depend on their vigor. It's all going to depend on the environment of the plant and how it grows. So as long as we take all of that into consideration, then we'll be extremely successful with our pruning and with our training as far as bending it out goes. If you guys have any questions, please come into the store or feel free to email me or anyone at the store. You can call us, and we can all give you a lot of pointers on how to prune a specific plant, just based off of what the structure of that plant is. So if you've got a really hardy plant and you're having a hard time figuring out how to make it fuller we can definitely help you with that. If you've got a plant that just has a hard time supporting itself, we can definitely help you with that. If you've got some gorgeous bushes that you've got outside on your landscaping and you're looking to just kind of shape those up, that all comes into trimming and pruning. And once you start getting into that shaping, that's when we start getting into really making the plant look the way we want to. Guys who are into landscaping have a huge understanding of this, and it's absolutely easy to implement into our garden once we start looking at, again, the type of plant and the genetics of that plant that we're working with. So feel free to ask us any questions you have. Definitely check out our website, sustainhydro.com. Email us if you've got any questions. My email is sustainablejeffrey@gmail.com. Check out our Facebook page, Sustainable Hydroponic and Organic Garden Supply, and definitely like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. That way we can keep producing more and more of these videos, get some people actively gardening out here. We really want to improve the quality of our environment, and the best way we do that is through sustainability and sustainable gardening. So stay tuned, we've got more to come.